With a video presentation on how to craft and create an enthymeme. I'm going to go through this slideshow, which will be posted online for you in Canvas, and I'll try to explain in as quick and easy a fashion as I can how to go about crafting an enthymeme. And you can use these same instructions. When you get through this, I think you will understand how to use these same instructions in the same presentation to help figure out how to craft an enthymeme from something that you've read. So this will work for creating your own enthymeme, and it will also work for deriving an enthymeme from something that you've read. And we'll be getting lots of practice doing the second one, which will help us with the first one. Deriving enthymemes tends to help us with creating enthymemes of our own. Okay, some of this will be refresher, some of this will not. Either way, let me get started. Okay, for crafting and creating an enthymeme, one of the first things we need to do is go ahead and sort of have a working / practical definition of what the word enthymeme actually means. You'll find different definitions of it. Some of them will be kind of confusing, but I like to come up with practical or working definitions of things to make things easier on my students. So for a working definition basically is a practical definition, right? So it's a term that it's the definition of a term that you use to make things smoother and easier, especially when you're learning how to do something. So in our situation, for our circumstances, our working or practical definition of enthymeme is a holistic statement of an argument where the main assertion of that argument is set in a causal relationship with that argument's reasoning. Again, it's a holistic statement of an argument where the main assertion of the argument is set in a causal relationship with the argument's reasoning. You heard me use that word causal a number of times in this presentation. Make sure you don't confuse it with casual, right? It looks like casual, but it's actually causal. And by holistic here, I want to make sure that that's understood. I mean, an attempt to get as your arms around an entire argument as much as possible, not just identifying specific parts of it, but really sort of describing the entire thing as much as you possibly can. So that's what I mean by the word holistic here. Enthymemes are syllogistic, meaning that they are essentially a syllogism. If you start poking around online looking for definitions of enthymemes, you'll notice that syllogism is often mentioned. It's useful to know that enthymemes are syllogistic because when we form an enthymeme properly, we can express it syllogistically in order to test its logic and validity. There'll be more on testing enthymemes later on in another video. This video is going to focus on how to actually put enthymemes together, how to craft them, right? So, the first step in putting an enthymeme together is identifying and specifying the argument's topic. For the purposes of crafting an enthymeme, it's really useful to think of a topic as a noun or a noun phrase. Essentially, the topic that you arrive at while crafting an enthymeme should be something that you can use as a subject of a sentence. If you're not that up to speed on parts of speech and or the parts of a sentence, and that's those of you that are up to speed on it, I think might be surprised at the number of people who've learned to write, come through high school, learned to write, become very good writers without really getting into the weeds of parts of speech and parts of sentences. If I've just described you and you need a little bit of review on that, or you need a little review on that, you can get that review using the resources that you see linked to here, right? You can go ahead and click on that in the PDF of this presentation that you'll find online. You can actually click on that link, or you can go ahead and type it out if you want. But you can also go to our course website and get this PDF and click on that link that you see here. Okay? When identifying and specifying an argument's topic, it's important to remember that your topic needs to be what the argument is about. Avoid the temptation to overthink this part. Students often want to make the selection and articulation of an argument's topic a lot harder and more complex than it really is or needs to be. Now, the topic that I've identified for the enthymeme that I'll be putting together toward the end of this presentation is sort of the example enthymeme that I'm using here to illustrate the points that I'm making in this presentation. That topic is simply SUVs, right? If you can imagine someone interested in SUVs that maybe has a question that they want to answer through the research process about SUVs, like, are SUVs really still a really good purchase for people to be making? They might, if they're doing that, then obviously their topic would be, using what I've just explained about topic creation and selection, that topic would be SUVs, right? The second step identifying, the second step in creating an enthymeme is identifying and crafting the argument's main assertion. You've got to start off by actually identifying that topic first before you can get to the point where you can identify and craft the argument's main assertion. Now remember, the main assertion of an argument is the same thing as its thesis statement. Those two terms are synonymous. Calling it a main assertion instead of a thesis statement is useful when teaching because that helps to remind students that one of the most important aspects of a thesis statement is that it must be an assertion. It must be something that can be argued, meaning that your thesis statement / main assertion cannot be a statement of fact. Fact and assertion are not opposite terms, and if you come see me during office hours, I'll be happy to walk you through the weeds of that. But fact and assertion are opposite terms, but assertions are not statements of fact. If you have a statement of fact, essentially a statement of fact, just to kind of quickly review this, is an assertion that has been argued to the point where we accept it as being true, right? So an assertion can be argued, whereas a statement of fact cannot because it's already been settled, right? I hope that makes sense. If not, come see me during office hours and I'll explain that for you further. To craft your own main assertion, you must use your topic as the subject of a complete sentence in which you express the argument's thesis statement. So again, to craft your main assertion, you must use your topic as the subject of a complete sentence in which you express the argument's thesis statement. Please, if you need some review of the 4 different kinds of sentences that occur in our language, in English, you can do that review using the resource that you see linked to here. Again, you can go to the course website and get the PDF of this presentation and click on that link that you see on this particular slide to get to this resource. To test your thesis statement, to make sure that you have an assertion as your thesis statement, to make sure that you haven't mistakenly somehow arrived at a statement of fact and are trying to use it as a thesis statement / main assertion, you can place the word not just before the main verb or predicate in your thesis statement, and then ask yourself if it's possible to argue both versions. If it's not possible for you to argue both versions, then your thesis statement is not an assertion, it's a statement of fact. That's a good, easy way of testing your main assertion to make sure that it is actually an assertion and not a statement of fact. So again, you just place the word not next to the main verb or before the main verb of your thesis statement. If you can argue both versions, if you can see both versions as being arguable, then what you have is an assertion. If not, then what you have is most likely a statement of fact. Okay? So the main assertion for the enthymeme that I'll be putting together here at the end of this presentation, the example I'm deriving for you to kind of illustrate things, is SUVs are a great purchase, and you can see SUVs is bolded. That's the subject of the sentence. It's also the topic of the argument, right? SUVs are a great purchase. The third step in putting together an enthymeme, crafting an enthymeme, is identifying and summarizing the argument's reasoning. This is what I often refer to as the hardest part. Most students refer to it as the hardest part. First, you got to keep in mind that the reasons you arrive at for your thesis statement, they should be considered valid, persuasive, and true, and are often called... First, keep in mind that the reasons that you arrive at for why your thesis statement should be considered valid, persuasive, and true, they're often called points in high school. You probably learned to refer to them as points. Your points are what's typically developed in the body of an essay, and when those points are taken together and understood together, those points, which I'll refer to from this point forward as reasons, they are what constitutes the reasoning of your argument. Basically and essentially, the argument's reasoning is best defined as a summary of the reasons why you believe your thesis statement to be valid and true. Again, reasoning is best defined, an argument's reasoning is best defined as a summary of the reasons or points why you believe your thesis statement to be valid and true. Now, since your reasons constitute your reasoning, in order to express your reasoning, you'll first need to express your reasons, right? The best, most effective, and efficient way to express those reasons is as complete, simple sentences featuring your argument's topic as a subject of those sentences. You'll notice me kind of returning to that idea of using the topic as a subject of the sentences that you are crafting here in the pursuit of putting together your enthymeme. That'll, as we move through the term, it'll make a lot of sense why I'm saying that. But for right now, just note that you must, when you're articulating your points slash reasons, right, you need to go ahead and make sure that you're expressing those reasons in simple sentences that feature the topic of your essay as a subject of those sentences. Here are the 3 reasons for the enthymeme that I'll be putting together later in this presentation. SUVs, you notice that topic is a subject of the sentence, are spacious. SUVs, again, topic of the essay is a subject of that sentence, have great towing packages. And again, SUVs, subject to that sentence, the third sentence, are wonderful off-road vehicles. Those are the 3 reasons, aka points, that I have for that thesis statement that I came up with a little while ago, which is that SUVs are a great purchase, right? Hope that makes sense. If not, let me know. Next, you need to look at your reasons and analyze them for what they have in common. And if one or more of your reasons appears to be too dissimilar from the others for you to summarize them altogether, then you will need to rewind a bit and maybe find better, more similar reasons. Why is that the case? Because to craft an enthymeme, you must first summarize your reasons in a single, simple sentence that features your essay's topic as its subject. Again, to craft an enthymeme, you must summarize your reasons in a single, simple sentence that features your essay's topic as its subject. Now, this is the part that's usually pretty tough for students to sort of absorb and for them to do. It's the part of enthymeme construction that tends to give people who are new to the process the most trouble. One way of understanding why that's the case is to think about this. You know how people in general often know what they believe, but they don't always have the best sense of why they believe the things that they believe. Adopting a position is pretty easy, but explaining the reasoning behind the adoption of that position is often very hard. You can think about the difference between normal, polite conversation and scholarly conversations. In regular conversation, people often articulate what they believe, but aren't often asked to defend their beliefs. While in the world of scholarships, students, professors, and other participants in those conversations are always asked to defend their beliefs and positions, especially when they're articulating those beliefs and positions on the page. Now, part of becoming a scholar is getting comfortable with understanding and expressing your own reasoning. It's a skill, and it's an extremely important and fundamental skill, and it's a skill, because it's a skill, you'll get better at it over time with patient practice, right? You'll get better at it if you practice it regularly through such things as the construction of enthymemes. It's part of the reason we teach enthymemes in this program. We emphasize it so heavily. It's to help students get better at reasoning. The summary of reasons that I have identified for the enthymeme that I will be crafting in this presentation, put quite simply, SUVs are convenient. And you'll notice that this summary, also features the topic of the essay, SUVs, as its subject, right? Now we're on to step 4, which is assembling the enthymeme, putting it together. Remember, our working definition of the enthymeme is a holistic statement or expression of an argument where the argument's main assertion is set in a causal relationship with the argument's reasoning. At this stage, we are ready to assemble the enthymeme using this definition to help us do so. But first, what's a causal relationship? I want to make sure that's absolutely clear. Causal in this context means something, it means that a thing or a series of things happens because something else leads to it. Typically we use the word because between things to set them in a causal relationship. So again, don't overthink it. Causal means that something is causing something else to happen, right? Something leads to something else. Here's a pro tip. When setting up your enthymeme, watch out for the formulation. It's a common formulation, because of. Avoid that of, placing that of after the because. That little pro tip will save you a ton of headache, as it will keep you from crafting an enthymeme that's difficult to test and or basing your argument on spurious or incomplete reasoning. Again, avoiding that one little common mistake, because of. Just use the word because, not because of. Avoiding that because of formulation will save you a ton of headache. It'll keep you from crafting an enthymeme that's hard to test, and it'll keep you from basing your argument on spurious or incomplete reasoning. Now the main assertion for the enthymeme that I will be putting together here, that I'm kind of slowly putting together here, you remember, is SUVs are a great purchase. You remember that the reasoning, the summary of reasons or reasoning for the enthymeme that I'm putting together here is that SUVs are convenient. Finally, here's the enthymeme I've been working on the entire presentation, in which the main assertion of the argument is placed in a causal relationship with its reasoning. SUVs are a great purchase because SUVs are convenient. You'll notice that before the because appears the thesis statement, and after the because appears the reasoning. You can read that as a holistic statement of the argument that I would make, where I'm essentially making the case that SUVs are a great purchase because SUVs are convenient. What makes them convenient? Well, SUVs are great off-road, SUVs have great towing packages, and SUVs are very spacious. You can see that argument, if constructed that way, is fairly bulletproof. Now, you can disagree with that argument. There are lots of arguments that would disagree with that argument very strongly, and I see them every day, all the time. But the argument in and of itself would be a solidly constructed argument if you use the principles laid out here to put together this enthymeme to help strengthen the reasoning of the argument and to make it clear to you what your own reasoning is as you're putting the argument together. I hope that makes sense. That's it for now. I'll have a follow-up video for you soon, walking you all through how to break enthymemes down and test their logic and reasoning. Please let me know if you have any questions after viewing this video and taking in this presentation. Again, remember that you can go online and find a PDF of this presentation that includes the links that I referred to earlier. Thank you. Bye.